Welcome to The Who Project. I'm your host, Paul Gittens, where I sit down with leading professionals, artists, entrepreneurs, and visionaries. Each share their definitions of success, past and present, how they differ, if at all, and what milestones they've set for the next chapter of their lives. This isn't just any podcast. It's a celebration of real stories from real people. Together, we'll explore the choices that have shaped their paths, the challenges they've conquered, and how they bravely carved out lives on their own terms. Each episode is a treasure trove of insights, tools, and inspiring tales to help you ignite your own journey. So buckle up and get ready for some great conversations. Dwight Ireland, D. Irish, as you are known in some of the circles with your oldest friends. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me.
You know, we've known each other. I was doing the math on this. Correct me if I'm wrong. 33 years?
Is it really that long? Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, about that.
That's crazy. That's a head scratcher, right? When you think about it, like 33 years.
More than half our lives.
Yeah. That's wild to me right now, man. You know, and so it's really interesting when I'm doing legacy and I'm thinking about who I'm going to interview and the questions I'm going to ask. And, you know, for you being one of my oldest friends, it was like, well, yeah, I know everything about D. Right. And the reality is that you really don't. Right. So this is the part that I'm really going to enjoy. And I'm so excited that you're here. Right. I've watched your career trajectory unfold over like 33 years. Right. I mean, longer gone are the days when you were at Benetton.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. In Markville Mall.
And you were across the street?
Yes. Working at the, part-time, like when I think about that, man, like that's wild, and to see your career and where you are today. And, today you're the vice president of U.S. and international sales for Speakers Spotlight. You're an actor, a model. I mean, this is unbelievable, man. I can't wait to get into all of it and find out how this is all unfolded for you. But before I do, I think one of the most important things for me to always say now more than ever, I think maybe it's because we're just getting older, is to just say, hey man, mad respect for everything that you've done. Everything that you have gone after and you've tried and you've pushed and you've been in lanes that I would probably go on a limb and say that nobody else in your family's been in.
Yes, that's I'd say that's pretty accurate.
Right. So you've been pioneering this life, right? You've been pioneering, your way of how you want to live your life. And, I always say that growth occurs at the end of your comfort zone. And to me, you've always shown that you are comfortable going outside of your comfort zone, from hopping on a plane and going to South Africa to model, to New York to model, to come back and okay, how do I get into, representing speakers and all of that, like, and then rise to where you are today. It's just, there's a lot to be said about that. So I just wanted to give you your flowers today, man, and say I got a lot of respect for you. And I'm proud to know you as a friend.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah. So can you explain to me or to the audience what Speaker Spotlight is?
Sure. Speaker Spotlight is a speakers bureau. So what we do is we represent talent that will go out and speak to corporate audiences. The way that I sort of like to position myself is I connect thought leaders with corporate clients. I'm solving their problems. And so ultimately, if, for example, a large bank reaches out and says, hey, our staff needs to feel a little bit more motivated, I can send recommendations to them. If, you've got a group of, educators who are looking for someone who can encourage them to sort of, be more creative, explore possibilities, show more empathy, there's a speaker for that. And so we kind of work as a liaison between the two groups, and then we negotiate the fees on behalf of the talent. And that's what we do.
Okay. So what does a day in the life look like for Dwight at the office? What is that like?
Well, a day in the life at the office has changed since the pandemic because, the great thing about my job is it allows me to work remotely.
Yeah.
Working in US and international sales means that the majority of my clients are outside of Canada. So there's not a lot of me going to see speakers in Toronto. It's me reaching out to my contact base in the US or Australia or Europe and finding solutions to the problems that they have. So a day in the life for me is, I'm getting up in the morning and, scheduling meetings, scheduling calls, a lot of Zoom calls, and reaching out and responding to the clients that have needs.
Okay. So would you say that there's a lot of inbound like clients that are reaching out to you guys? So you've built obviously a strong business and foothold in this market. So you're getting a lot of inbound calls or emails that say, "Hey, we need this."
100%. So just to give you a little bit of background on Speaker Spotlight, it was founded by a married couple, Martin and Farah Perlmutter. They were both in university doing different things. He was in law, she was in marketing. And I believe it was Farah's uncle was going to speak at a dentistry conference.
Okay.
And he needed some help with some marketing materials and some scheduling as far as getting him to and from the conference and, all of the things that a speaker would typically need. And so they jumped in and helped out and they found that there was a need there. And so
Wow.
they both left their careers and started a speakers bureau in their apartment.
Wow.
And it's gone from just the two of them to a staff of almost 30. The company's been in existence for close to 30 years. And we've got a huge database of clients that we've worked with over the years that we continue to go back to, and they continue to reach out to us because we've established a great relationship with them.
Wow. Okay. So there, you just learned something new. How long have you been in the industry?
I've been in the speaking industry for 15, 16 years.
Okay.
And before that, I was working as a music agent. So I was doing something similar, but working with musicians, rock bands, hip hop artists, you name it.
So this industry, you call it a speakers bureau, yeah?
Yeah.
Is it a very niche industry? Are there a lot of players in the, is it very competitive?
In Canada, it's smaller because I think obviously the population is smaller. The largest region for speakers and speakers bureaus is the US. Canada probably has between, let's say, 5 and 10 bureaus. I would say we're one of the largest. There are probably about 2 others that are equal in terms of size. But in the US, I think there's probably upwards of 50 to 75 speakers bureaus. And anybody that's in the event planning industry would work with a speakers bureau if they're looking to hire someone to speak at an event. Right. So we're known in the conference industry, but just like anything else, it's niche depending on what you do.
So you are responsible for, like you said, the US and international. Is that the bulk of your business, did you say? Or is there in Canada, is there like somebody else that runs Canadian stuff?
Yeah. So we have about 11 other agents that work in Canada. So even if I've probably captured maybe 3 to 5% of the US market in terms of, what we do. It's big, but I think for Canada, the majority of our revenue comes from the Canadian market.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what advice would you give someone if they, wanted to get into, this industry? Like, how do you break into it?
You know what, to be honest with you, you reach out, you do your research, you connect with somebody that's at a speakers bureau. I've always believed in doing sort of like those shadow interviews where you come in and, you just talk to someone and, you may not necessarily they may not be looking for someone at the moment, but you can come in and ask questions. And, if you're a people person, then this would be the job for you because, there's a lot of connecting with people at conferences, connecting with people over the phone. So there isn't a course that you could take that would prepare you to sort of work in this world. So I would just say, and this is something that I've always believed in, just dive right in.
Yeah, it's an important point that you just made there, right? It's like there's not a university program or college certificate or diploma that you can get. And there's so many different careers out there. And again, this is why I think legacy is so very interesting, right? Because as first and second generation Canadians, and we'll get into this, right? We kind of just only know what we know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of like these mainstream, jobs or industries. And again, here you are doing something that, just completely outside of the norm. The way I'd best describe this is you color outside the box. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't color inside the box.
Right.
What do you like about, what you do the most? And what do you like the least?
I like solving problems, right?
Okay.
Because the thing that we, I think, really benefit from in terms of having speakers speak to large audiences, whether they be motivational or whether it could be someone on mental health and wellness. Me suggesting someone that resonates with an audience has a large impact. It cascades beyond just sort of the message that they share from the stage. It goes back into individuals' communities. We've had situations where we've had a mental health and wellness speaker on stage, and then we received feedback from people that were in the audience saying that, they were suffering in silence. And it was this person that got up on stage that made a difference in their lives, and it allowed them to sort of feel comfortable to share it with their boss or their manager. So it's an impactful job.
I like that. You see, I'd never thought about that, right? Because, in my mind, right, with just a sales background, right, media sales, you would think that, I'm like, okay, so you connect the speaker with the conference, you negotiate your fees, you get paid, there's commission structures or bonuses or whatever, all involved. And you're actually, amplifying that and saying, hey, that we could really do something that could help people, that impact people, which is something I didn't even think about. So thanks for sharing that part of it, man. That's really interesting. So for the last, what you said, 15 years, 16 years?
Yeah, 15, 16 years. Yeah.
Man, you've been meticulously building a career in an industry that represents speakers and artists, because you mentioned that. We'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you've been curating a body of work. It was principal roles in TV, film, and even stage.
Yeah. Well, it's been a while since
On the stage?
I've been on the stage.
But before you go, I just want to rhyme these down, right? Because, I list these off. I should say Chucky, Murdoch Mysteries, Private Eyes, The Romanoffs, The Coroner, Mayday, Gen V, right? The Expanse, Nurses, Transplant, a favorite of mine, which was Designated Survivor with Keith Sutherland, sorry. And that's just scratching the surface, because the list goes on and on and on and on, right? For you, that's just TV. We didn't even get into film, right? I know that you had a part in Suicide Squad, which was a Will Smith film. Man, it's like, whether it's the arts, in acting or modeling, it's extremely competitive.
Yeah.
If you had to guess, how many times have you heard the word no?
Oh man, it's interesting that you're asking that question. So in the industry that I'm in, you don't hear no, you just don't hear anything. Right. So, but at the end of the day, I would say probably thousands of rejections.
See, and that's the thing, right? Like, whether it's what you're doing, Monday to Friday, right? Speaker spotlight, right? Because not everybody you match is going to get chosen.
Sure.
Right. And then when we talk about, acting and modeling, you can do these auditions and nothing comes of it. But what keeps you going?
Oh man, the thing that I focus on in anything that I do, it's part of it's the wins, right? And you've got to find the wins in. So, for example, if I book a speaker for an event, it's the great feedback that I get that sustains me, right? This person impacted our audience. We trust you. We trust your opinion, Dwight. We're going to come back to you next year.
Your judgment.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I focus on that. I don't focus on the negatives, on the ones that I don't get. And when it comes to acting, I think to me, it's not the outcome that's important. It's the ability to be able to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Right. And so what that is to me is, you could be sitting here having a coffee with someone on a Friday afternoon and get a 7-page script and they say, okay, well, we need you to memorize this, prepare, get into character, and present this to us on Sunday.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And so it's like, when you look at it, it's daunting.
Yeah.
But then when you actually put your head down and you focus on it, it's an accomplishment if you can actually be prepared, deliver. And even if you don't get the part, the fact of the matter is you did something that you didn't think you could do 2 days before.
Wow. True. Okay. That's deep. So did you like take acting classes over the years? Like,
yeah, I started in my
to help you prep. Like how do you prep for 7-page script and know it in a couple of days?
I started in my teens in terms of taking acting classes, and I've been doing it on and off, for most of my life. At U of T, I took theater for a couple of years. And then, I think a lot of people like myself who have full-time careers, they'll take weekend workshops for acting.
Okay.
Or they'll do drop-in classes, that sort of thing. I think the key really is you want to keep the muscle memory there, because it's difficult for you to walk onto set not having acted for a number of years or taken any classes and have the responsibility and pressure to be able to present and perform.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I like that. Thanks for sharing that. So let's pivot away from, your professional achievements and get to know D, the person, right? So when I was doing some of this research, of course, I know you and we've established we've known each other for 33 years. But when I was doing some research about the podcast, I read that you believe that honesty and integrity are the keys to building long-lasting relationships. Is that something that was instilled in you as a child from your parents? Or where did you get that?
You know what? I think watching them, yes, was instilled in me at an early age, but I didn't know what that meant. It just was, I wanted to be like them, right? It wasn't until I probably got into my 20s when I started to sort of ask myself, okay, what are the things that people like about you?
Okay.
Right? What are the things that about you, Dwight, the person, that allow you to maintain deep, lasting friendships, right? And so I think at the end of the day, it is honesty and integrity. Do the people that I know trust me? Am I there for them?
Yep.
Do they appreciate the time that we spend together? So all of those things, I think, kind of taught me that, some of these things, these core values are embedded in me. And I think that's what I want to sort of maintain and keep for the rest of my life.
It's interesting. I was speaking to a friend of mine and, it was probably about 2 years ago. I'm in advertising, he was in marketing. And I pointed out that, in corporate Canada, we were talking about, businesses and their marketing, their advertising, or launching a business. We talk about core values, mission statements, vision statements, right? But we don't do it for ourselves, right? It's like nowhere does anybody ever tell you, let's sit down and write your core values.
Sure.
What's your mission statement for your life and what's the vision of your life, right? So for me, when we were having that conversation, it was a challenge. How do we, let's start this process and really try to dig into what our core values are. So you've listed integrity and honesty. Are there any other core values for you that's on that list?
I would say compassion, respect are very important to me. And I, my older son, which we'll probably get into, that's embedded in him. But I would say with my younger son, even more so, he's only 12. I really want to make sure that these things as I get older, are things that if I'm going to leave a legacy, these are the things that I want to leave.
It's so interesting. And we're going to dive into that a little bit because to me, there's a real curiosity, that I'm finding even more in life now. As I age, as I evolve, right?
As we age.
Yeah. Right. And you, to your point, it's you've, the way I always say the way we raise Jay is, it's a different person because you're a different person than say even, Cole and Justine, right? And I'm constantly thinking about what I did right or I did wrong and how to evolve So it's interesting because we were just talking about being parents. Tell me about yours. Were they born in Canada?
Yeah. So neither of them were born in Canada. My dad was born in Jamaica. My mom was born in Guyana.
Okay.
And they met here.
What year was that?
Oh, God.
What year did they come?
So they both came in the late 60s. The majority of, and it's interesting because the majority of my dad's siblings moved to the US. He was one of two that moved to Canada. The majority of my mom's siblings moved to the US. And the only reason why she came to Canada was because my grandparents moved here. So she wanted to be close to them.
That is so interesting. Just to mirror that, all of my dad's brothers moved to the States, right? And my mom's family came to Canada. So it's really interesting how you've got to make a big life decision.
Yeah.
Right? When you're leaving the Caribbean, right? And you're obviously leaving the Caribbean for a reason, and you want to get a better life somewhere else. And you got to figure out, is it Canada or is it the US? So when they came to, did they come to Toronto first?
Yep.
Okay. So when they came to Toronto, which part of the city did they live in?
So my dad was living on Eglinton West.
Okay.
And my mom was living in Scarborough. Probably, to be honest with you, she was probably living with my grandparents who, up until they passed were sort of deep in Scarborough.
Wow. Okay. So it's really interesting that, I always make a point to ask that question, right? Because the city is as big as it is, and it's kind of where you land. So when you say your dad was Eglinton West, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a strong West Indian Jamaican community. Right. So you're thinking you're leaving your island. You want to go find that.
Sure.
Right. And then for your mom coming here, of course, if she's got family.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to go where that family is.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, totally. So you were born here.
I was born here.
Okay. So that makes you second generation Canadian. Right. And you have siblings.
I have
sibling.
Wait, can I tell you my parents' story about how they met?
Oh yeah. I'd love to hear that. Tell me.
So, as the story goes, they met in August at sort of like, I guess, a pre-university, a U of T West Indian Students Association dance.
Oh, so they were really young when they came here then.
Yeah. And
yeah, that would make sense. Yeah. So they were like in their late teens, early 20s, maybe?
Early 20s.
Yeah. Okay.
And they met at the dance in August. My dad proposed in October. They got married in May.
Come on. He just locked her up quick.
Just like that.
Wow.
Still married.
Wow. And how many years is that now?
God, so we are looking at 54 years.
Well, I guess when you know. When they knew, they knew.
Yeah.
54 years. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Ireland. That is huge. Wow. So siblings?
Yes. I've got a younger brother.
Okay.
6 years younger than me.
6 years. Does he live here in Toronto as well?
No, he moved to Atlanta. We're probably going back about, I'd say 17 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. 17 years ago. Man. Does he come back often or no?
Not as often as I'd like to see him.
Yeah.
But the US is home for him, and he's got some small kids, so traveling with a posse is always a little bit different.
Yeah. Wow, man. So 17 years, man. That's a long time. So your parents, man, wait a second. I got to take my hat off to your parents here. Give them some flowers here too, because they raised two boys, right? One of the eldest, which is you, decided to get into different things and do different things and, travel and spread his wings, right? And the other one, went and said, hey, I'm going to go make a life in the United States of America. And when we think about West Indians, this might be a generalized statement, but, coming to a country like Canada and living in Toronto, and there's not a large West Indian community here. Right? Especially back then.
Yeah.
Right. So to be able to give your kids, the courage to go off and do their own thing and not be so concerned about, whether you guys are going to stick close to home and be there for them. It just seems like they're really independent and there's a lot to be said about that, right? That they give you that.
Yeah.
You're smiling.
Well, so I'd say yes and no.
Okay.
I think coming from the Caribbean, my parents really focused on, what I would say a lot of my peers would say their parents focused on with them, which is, get an education, a good one, get a job, and move out. Right. And in terms of the education, it was, like, yeah, be a lawyer, be a doctor, be something like that. Right. There wasn't that sort of, I don't think they looked at it through the lens of creativity, which is like, you can do anything. It was more like, you can do some things that we will be proud of you about, and then everything else, we're not interested in hearing. And so I specifically recall at the age of 17 or 18, holding up an application to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City and saying, oh, I really want to go here instead of university. And the response was, well, who's going to pay for that?
I'm laughing because I was going to get to that, in our conversation, but it's so true, right? So I guess what I was trying to establish was somehow they didn't hold you back, right? Like you might have had to fight for it a little bit, right? But they didn't say absolutely not, right? And which kind of gave you I guess it had to have given you that fortitude to go, oh man, like, okay, I can go do this.
Yeah.
Right. But I do understand what you're saying, right? Because it was almost like a script, right? And it's kind of like, I think we buy into the script when we come to Canada, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's get an education, find a partner, get married, buy a home,
right,
live happily ever after kind of story, right? Like that's what it was. And that's what your parents wanted you to do. And because it was almost like you were going to mirror their life. So I understand that. But what I was trying to unpack there was more along the lines of how do you like figure out, in your lifetime, and maybe we should go back a little bit and talk about your childhood so we can have a real clear, understanding of how you got that courage, right? To hold up that application, even when you knew that it was going to be, not approved, right? But you still did it anyway. So let's just go back a little bit and talk about your childhood and then maybe middle school and high school to try and build that story to kind of figure out how you got to that place.
Sure.
Right. So I love to ask this question. What's your first childhood memories?
Man.
And how old were you when you have those memories?
First childhood memory would probably be getting dropped off at nursery school and my mom standing at the door and me sort of running to the door and, not wanting to leave her. And then them kind of locking it with this latch that was probably about 6 feet high that I could never unlock. and then being kind of left there to sort of make friends with the kids.
Wow. So in that process, right, of being a kid and like, we all go through that anxiety of being separated from your parents, right? Where was that? That was in Scarborough?
That was in Scarborough, yeah.
Okay. So the group of kids, that you had to make friends with, was it a diverse?
No. I think growing up in Scarborough at that time in the early 70s, I don't think it was very diverse at all. I mean, at least not for me in nursery school, elementary school, middle school, and even high school.
It's an important point, and that's why I asked the question, right? Because again, when I think about legacy and I think about leaving this digital footprint, this digital legacy, right? For your boys to hear these stories, you know what I mean? Like this is so very important to peel it all the way back and talk about what that was like, right? Because they only know you from a certain age onward, right? But to get insight into what life was like as a child, it's so interesting. Did you make friends easily?
I did. I made a lot of friends. Unfortunately, we didn't have social media, so as you got older, you lost touch with them. If they moved somewhere else, that was it, right? Like we weren't looking them up online or anything like that, which is what a lot of kids
do now.
Yeah.
So we're in a place. It's not a diverse community. You're obviously a visible minority. When did you realize that you were a visible minority?
I think early on, you would hear the comments. I do distinctly remember I would have been probably 7 or 8. And, I remember saying to my mother, oh, like these kids are calling me like something like Blackie or something like that. Right. Something just really ridiculous. And, and she kind of made the comment, well, just make a wisecrack back at them. Right. Like don't take it. It wasn't the sort of thing where, she was coming to the school, running to the principal's office and, filing a complaint against the kid or anything like that. It was just kind of, handle it your own way. And so early on, I learned that I kind of had to assimilate. You laugh.
I laugh.
I know.
I laugh because you were the eldest.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of growing up as an only child for the first 6 years of your life, right?
Yeah.
Right. And, I'm the youngest, but my siblings are 7, 9, and 14 years older than I am. Mm-hmm. So I chuckle because it's the same experience, right?
Yeah.
Growing up, being in Scarborough, being in a non-diverse community, and kids were making jokes, right? Or, laughing at you, right? And I've said this before, right? You have a choice. You're either going to fight, right? Or you're going to make some friends.
Exactly. 100%. Right? Yeah.
And I made friends.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I totally can empathize with what you're saying, right? With respects to how you had to really, stick handle your way through that. So what were your memories? Were they painful? Did you have like painful memories of being a child, or like, in school, or were they fond memories, or is it like, it's kind of like it is what it is and just kind of got through it?
And to be honest with you, I had fantastic memories of, growing up in Scarborough. One of the things that I think may have been unique to me at the time was that I had this weird ability to be able to read at an early age. And so I remember in grade 1, the teachers up on writing, like words like cat, hat, whatever on the chalkboard and sounding them out for the kids. And, I was just sort of whizzing through everything. And then she gave me like a novel and said, well, can you read from there? And I said, yeah, sure. And so I started reading pages from this novel. And so they brought me in to be assessed. And I guess I had qualified to be gifted. And so they skipped me. So I spent like 3 weeks in grade 1 and then went straight to grade 2. Right? So I think the benefit to that was I was always known as kind of like the smart kid, but I was also pretty athletic. And so I would be able to keep up with the kids that were a year older than me.
Right.
And then, when it came to competing, I would always compete with the kids that were a grade below me. Right. So that was, I guess, a bit of a confidence boost as well. So yeah, I had a great time.
Answer me a question about your quote unquote weird ability to read young, right? Did your mother and father spend time reading books with you when you were young, or is this something that just genetically you just like bang, you just got?
Yeah, they both read books with me at an early age, but they were children's books. It just was something that I picked up. Like I was able to comprehend, I guess, word patterns at an early age. I don't think they anticipated that this was going to happen, but I do remember they actually had the option to keep me in grade 1, or move me to grade 2, and thankful that they chose to sort of move me up a grade.
So elementary school, middle school, bang, easy.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't
flip it through it.
To be honest with you, I appreciated kind of like that gifted terminology at an early age, but as I got, into like grade 5, 6, 7, 8, it was more important to me at the time to be popular. And so I probably spent less time than I should have focusing on my grades and more time sort of maybe just being a kid, right? Playing competitive sports, hanging out with friends, that sort of thing.
So did that kind of bleed into your high school experience?
It up until high school, it was sort of the thing. But then I went to a high school, and they don't do this anymore, but I went to a high school that had, I guess, what you would call, for lack of a better word, general, advanced, scholarship, and gifted, right? And I probably, fell somewhere between advanced and scholarship. And then when I met the gifted kids, I was like, geez. Like these guys are going to math camp, science camp, all those things. I was not interested in doing that at all. So yeah, I was no longer the gifted kid in high school.
Okay. So if Mr. and Mrs. Ireland were here right now and I asked them what kind of student you were in high school, what would they tell me?
Oh, they would probably say he was a good student in high school, but he probably could have spent more time studying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got through high school.
Yeah.
You get to was it grade 13 or was it OAC at the time?
It was
13.
Yeah, it was same thing.
Yeah. So now school's coming to an end, and I want to go back a bit because you said how old? I think you said you were 17 or 18 when you wanted to go to, right? Like high school was ending, and then you were like, oh, I want to go to the United States.
Yeah. High school was ending, and I was looking at options, and that was the one that I was kind of more interested in. But they were not interested, and to be honest with you, they said, look, we'll pay for university. We're not paying for that.
Okay. So how did you feel about that?
I wasn't, I was smart, but I wasn't independent. And so I think going back 30 years, maybe what I could have done was taken the summer to sort of raise money, apply anyway and see what happens. And I don't think they would have held me back. But I was kind of saying, well, I understand that I've got to go to post-secondary school.
Right.
And I don't have any money to pay for it. So
the bank of mom and dad.
Exactly. It's the bank of mom and dad, and I'll just figure it out from there.
So how did you land on, it was U of T, right?
Yeah.
So how did you land on U of T, and how did you land on your major?
U of T was the easy choice because I could choose to commute, which I did, as opposed to go on campus. It was between U of T and York.
Very pragmatic.
Yeah. And I chose U of T. And what was the other question?
No. So I said, how did you choose the school and then the major?
Oh, and then the major. Yeah. So English was the thing, right? Because I was a great reader in high school. I would spend hours at night just reading books, right? That was kind of like, that was my TV, my internet, right? It was, I can't sleep, I'm going to read.
So you'd prefer to read than watch TV?
Yeah, I would say yes, for sure. And although I was really interested in, like, almost an obsession with TV, the Saturday Star, I'd be so excited when we get the Saturday Star because it was, twice the thickness, the newspaper, and they had the TV guide in there. And then what I would do is I would read it from start to finish, and they'd have like TV trivia and all of those things. And I would look at the movies that they would be playing from, let's say, midnight to like 5 a.m. And they would have like, the 2 lead actors' names there. And then I would sort of memorize who those actors were, if I saw them in anything else, how popular they were. I'd just try and figure all of that. There was this kind of weird obsession with TV. But, my parents weren't letting me stay up at 2 o'clock in the morning, watching movies. So instead I would read.
The reason I asked that question is because you were obviously interested in acting.
Yeah.
Right. So in my mind, I was like, you'd be watching TV to watch the actors and see how that all unfolds, like the performances, and you kind of figure out, who you'd like to, marry or be. But there was this other side of you that was just like totally intellectual, that was looking at it from a completely different lens, which throws me off. Again, that's why I love doing this, right? Because you get this amazing insight into somebody and their life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their life. So was university for you a good experience? Was it a bad experience? Was it okay? Did you get what you wanted out of it?
You know what?
I mean, you met some great friends.
I definitely met some great friends that, I'm still close with today. So
that have been on this podcast.
That have been on this podcast. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the thing about university, it was great for me in terms of a way to kind of build my network of relationships. What did I get anything out of it? To be honest with you, I'd say probably no. I didn't get much out of it because I've always been a believer in, you just got to find what you're good at and do the work. If you want to be a doctor, go to university. If you want to be a lawyer, go to university. But if you're going to sort of just try and find your way in the world, I don't necessarily know that university is going to help you do that.
It's interesting because I often say when school's over at any level, like whether you decide to go on to post-secondary or not, and then go into the labor force, or when post-secondary is over, that the curtain of life is pulled back and it's revealed, right? And it's when you have to truly become responsible for yourself and your future. And, I was just having this conversation with our eldest son, Jay, Cole's, graduation this week. Right. And my point there was like, there was all these kids and they're getting, honor roll, and Cole got honor roll and Ontario Scholar, and, there's these distinction awards and all this stuff. Right. And I was like, this is all great. Right. But to your point, in life, it really begins after school is over. Right.
Yeah.
And then you can get the hard skills. Don't get me wrong. Right. Like the hard skill is you got that degree or that diploma. Right. Now, what I love to talk about is the power skills. The power skills is, just another way of saying soft skills, because those are the other things that are really, truly important. Right. Right. So it didn't really prep you for the real world. Did you have an expectation that it would?
No, I didn't have any expectation that it would. I just felt that it was what you're doing. To me, what I felt I was doing was prolonging the inevitable, which is, the real world.
Yeah. Right? So you graduated, and when did you, like, what was your first job? How did you find your first job? And like, it's got to be, we kind of bury these thoughts, right? And we just barrel through life, but you have to go back now and be like, in your early 20s, and now it's like school's over. Now what?
So when you say first job, I mean, my first job was
not part-time job. I mean, like your first full-time job.
Oh, okay.
University.
Post-university, it would have been working at the bank at RBC. Yeah.
Like retail? Like in the branch?
Customer service rep. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so how long did that last? And the second part of that question is, when did you realize that this was just not for you?
It lasted, I mean, I was working at the bank during university and just continued post university. But then, the environment wasn't for me. I distinctly remember walking into a meeting, which was more of like a workshop for customer service reps. It was just about kind of like, I don't know, professional development for us.
Yeah.
But they took people that were from all over the region and brought us together into a room, and we were doing introductions. And one woman introduced herself, and then the woman that came up next to introduce herself was like, "Of course I know you. We met at something similar to this 24 years ago." And I said to myself, "Oh my God, like, I don't want to be doing this in 20 years, 10 years, 5 years." And so, I had the luxury of still living at home. And so I kind of pulled back from that, and I got into music. I started working at HMV part-time, and, was just kind of figuring out my life. Right.
So the HMV, like, how did that pivot to you getting involved in the music industry?
Yeah. So,
or did it?
It did. One of so at the time, what HMV was really good at, I mean, Canada was a different place in terms of what we brought into the music ecosystem, right? So, there were a couple of large retailers, HMV, Music World, Sam the Record Man, Sunrise, and they had domestic releases, which would be, kind of like your Nelly Furtados, things like that, Bryan Adams. But then those same record companies were the gatekeepers for imports from the US. So if at the time, for example, like a Jay-Z or think of like an international artist, like a Burna Boy. If Burna Boy had released an album that was distributed in England, these retailers could make the decision as to whether, these record companies could make the decision as to whether or not they would produce and manufacture the Burna Boy CD or album in Canada, or they would sell it as an import, right? So Warner International would reach out to HMV and say, hey, do you want this? Right? And HMV might say no. So working in store, I met a gentleman who was importing music from the Caribbean into Canada and distributing it to HMV, Music World, Sunrise, all those retailers, right? And we started a friendship, and he said, well, you've got the knowledge of the retailers, and I've got the knowledge and the relationships with all of these international imports. Why don't we work together? And so a company was formed called Nuff Entertainment. And what we would do is we would import music that we thought would do well in Canada, from reggae labels to Caribbean soca music labels to jazz. And then we would sell them to all of the retailers. Yeah. And then, and we did that with CDs, and we did that with vinyl, and it was successful until Napster.
Napster changed the whole game for everybody.
Disrupted the whole industry. Yeah.
So in that time, were you modeling? Were you acting? Were you pursuing that? Or were you just focused on this?
Yeah, so modeling was a part of what I was doing.
Okay.
On a regular basis. It was never full time. Like, I mean, I would travel for periods of time, but it was not my primary source of income.
Okay.
Right. So
did you have an agent?
Yep. Yeah.
So how long did it take you to get an agent?
It didn't take long. I learned early on, it's like, I think with modeling, it's a look thing, right?
Right.
So if people are saying, yeah, you should do this,
yeah,
maybe they're right. And so it really is a matter of finding a photographer, taking some shots, and then pounding the pavement and, walking into agencies and saying, hey, would you be interested in representing me? But again, I will say that if you go back to, let's say, that would have been the early 90s, late 80s, there's still a little bit of racism in the modeling industry.
Yeah.
I specifically remember walking into an agency and saying, hey, are you looking to add any models to your roster, male models to your roster? And the woman said, I would, but we already have a black model.
Wow.
Right. And she mentioned his name, and I said, okay, cool. I went to a few more places, found representation. That was fine. And then I ended up bumping into this model that she was talking about. I'd never seen what he looked like. And he was about 5 shades lighter than I was, completely different look. Right. And, had kind of wavy hair. Right. And I said, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, but I think
we laugh.
Yeah, we laugh.
But there's pain in that laughter, right? Because, we realize at a very young age that we're different, right? We realize that, in order to get ahead, we'll assimilate.
Yep.
We realize that getting an education was something that was important to get, right? And now you're out here and thinking to yourself, well, it should be an even playing ground. And it wasn't. Listen, I was in film, we'll talk about that. But one of the things that I've said this before on the podcast is, which got me out of film, was being on set on a TV commercial, and the production manager over, the bullhorns goes, isn't it funny we give the black guys the shittiest jobs? So this was real, man. Like a lot has changed in 30 something years. It has, but it's important to point out that as we were trying to navigate our way through and be in different careers and break into different careers, that, we were faced with a lot of BS.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's really important to point that out, that, it's not just, I think our kids today, it's a much different experience for them than what we experienced. Right. And of course, for our parents, it was much different for them as well.
Yes.
Right. So, in all fairness, but there's a mindset, right, that that's really I zero in on, right? And it's a mindset about achieving your goals, right? And quite frankly, I think it's what many immigrants have adopted and be a part of who they are, right? And a lot of our families have this in common. And I framed it as the power of possibility, right? So I can only surmise that, whether it was modeling or acting or even creating and being a part of enough entertainment and doing something completely different that wasn't, you guys saw, an opportunity in the market and you went for it, right? So it was the power of what was possible.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the willingness, the definition really is the willingness to see possibilities everywhere instead of limitations, but with the correct thinking behind it. So would you say that you believe in the power of possibility?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I would say that I'm a bit of an eternal optimist.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can see that. Well, you have to be, right? To be able to take on, you know, roles and in life that are different than the mainstream, that are different than what you see our people even in, and one of the things that I wanted to ask too, because I heard you talking about going into, to, modeling agencies and having this confidence as a young black male at that time. I was just curious when you were saying it, what was it? Was it you were intelligent, right? You were, there's an aura about you, right? That's like, you're very self assured, right? Is that what gave you the confidence to just go do that?
You know what I think it was? I think partially it had to do with this idea of assimilation, right? So in order to be accepted at an early age, I had to kind of assimilate and become a part of, for lack of a better word, let's say the majority, the white community, right? I had friends that were Greek, Italian, you name it. I grew up I played soccer with guys of different ethnicities, and I had to kind of, I don't know, let's say pull back a little bit of my blackness.
Code switch.
Yeah. To be a part of it.
Yeah. Wear a mask.
And I was good at it.
Yeah.
And so I felt that those people saw me for who I was, the Dwight, the code switcher, if that's what you want to call it. And they were cool with it. And so I saw myself being able to do the exact same things that they did, right? If they were going to go and apply for a job at a place that, maybe was hiring primarily, white individuals, why couldn't I? Right? If so walking into a modeling agency was no different for me. I didn't have a chip on my shoulder with the expectation that, no, they're not going to hire me because I'm black. I was surprised, when I got that response, because that, I think, reminded me that, oh yeah, you are a black man. And even though we have 25 blonde haired, blue eyed guys on the roster, we only have one black model that we're going to hire or represent.
I oftentimes think about, how naive we were, right? But I think that naivete was the thing that kept us going, right? And part of that naivete is really the power of possibility, right? Because if you looked at it and said, well, I can't do it, this is not possible, we wouldn't be sitting here having, these types of conversations today, right? Where, and that's why I keep going back and I think about immigrants and their parents making the decision to leave Caribbean country and somehow find their way here, right? They had to believe that it was possible for a better life, better one, that they would leave their island where everybody looks like them.
Yeah.
Right? And then show up here where mostly nobody looks like them, right? And having to deal with all of that, So, you're a father of two boys, as you mentioned, right? Your eldest is a model, a very successful model, now DJ, right? Did you tell him to follow his dreams and believe what's possible? Because, I do distinctly remember, being at his high school graduation party, right? And the conundrum that you were in at that moment, right? With whether he was going to go off to uni or he was going to go pursue a career in modeling. So did you feel like it was important for you to share or give him that courage to make his own decision?
Yes. I mean, I was looking at my life and being at that point in my life when I was 18 and I was forced to, I wasn't given a choice, right? I wanted to go to New York and my parents said, you know what? If you're going to do that, do it on your own.
Right.
So the difference was my son, he had the opportunity to embark on a modeling career, but he'd also been accepted into Ryerson's journalism program.
Right.
And two things happened. One, there is a news broadcaster that shares the same name as me that I used to see at the gym all the time. And I said to him, I said, you know what, guess what? My son got into the Ryerson's journalism program, but he's also a successful model. And he's got to make that choice, right? Or we've got to help him make that choice. And the wisdom that he shared with me was that, you know what, like this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for him. He can always come back to school. Right. But if he wants to go out and sort of see where this takes him, he should. And I felt the same way too. And so we supported the decision for him to sort of try it out, knowing that he could always come back and we would welcome him if it didn't work out.
That's amazing, man. Like, I mean, that's just evolution and we're evolving here, right? And he's not come back,
He's
right?
not
Like,
come back.
you know, he's had an amazing career. Early days, I remember, walking in the path and seeing his image in a backlit poster in the path in Toronto's financial district and being like, taking a photo of it and, sending it and going, oh my God, like, look at this kid's career is like taking off. So you gave him that.
Yeah.
You and his mother gave him that, right? And said, go, right? That's super cool, man, because, you didn't just rinse and repeat.
No.
Right? You decided that it was, it was time to change and, evolve. Question for you, man. Happiness. What does that word mean to you?
Happiness is, I think, being content, feeling fulfilled. And it's, and it's a mindset.
It is. I do believe it is. I mean, there's not a lot that we can control in this world, right? In grand scheme of things, I think we can control what we put in our mouth and we can control what happens between our ears for the most part of it, right? So to your point, it's really truly finding that place where you're content.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Has it changed for you over the years, or have you always felt that way about happiness?
Oh, it's changed for me. And just to get maybe a little deep, I think the minute that I realized I needed to change my mindset was, going back to TV. I was watching this show and there was a scene between two women. Both of them were cancer patients and one was terminal. And the conversation was just about life and life decisions. And it really stuck with me. One of the women said to the other, you have an opportunity to get out of here if you become healthy and go out and change. This is life. This isn't a dress rehearsal. You only get one shot at it. And so when I think about things today, I think about it from the perspective of what am I going to think about when I'm on my deathbed?
Yeah.
To me, death is finite, right? Like it's done. It's over, right? And I would take all of the struggle, all of the pain, all of the happiness. I would do it all over again if I could have an extra year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
Right.
And so, when I'm having a terrible day, I think about that.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, what is this better? Knowing that I can turn this around than knowing that this is, I've got like 2 weeks to live.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So to me, I make the most out of every day, good or bad.
It's so interesting. I personally, I've struggled with trying to understand, what happiness really means, right? And so much of that for me is just you go through life, thinking if I'm not, if the world looks at me, it's not being good enough, then I've got to be an overachiever, right? So then you're always in this pursuit of happiness, which is the goalpost keeps moving, right? Because if I'm not valued, right? If I deep down like believe like I'm not valued, then that means the only way I can get value is the more things I achieve. And the more things I achieve, the more things I want to achieve. Right. So I've come to terms with that and understanding that happiness has to start within, right? And you can't make it an external thing.
Right.
Right. And
Yep.
and so that was a huge challenge. It's almost like the same thing with like success. Like I think happiness, success, fulfillment, there's, there are three things that just kind of intertwine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, what does success mean for you?
Well, I mean, to me, success is a goalpost that keeps moving.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think there's such a thing as being successful. I think there's such a thing as striving for success. But I think at the end of the day, if I said to you, I'm successful today, that could change tomorrow. Right. Everything that I've done up to this point, if I win an Academy Award next year, right. And, I say, hey, guess what? I'm successful. Well, guess what? I'm going back and auditioning for things the next day. Right. And it might be 10 years before I book another thing. Right. So am I really successful? Right. To me, it's really about this, the ability to go out and sort of look at success from the standpoint of this is something that I have things that I want to achieve that will, give me sort of wins, but I don't want to sort of ever be in a comfort zone where I'm looking at myself in the mirror and saying, I'm a success today.
Well, it's interesting because to me, it's like success is like a social currency here, right? And it's really, in my mind, this is just my opinion, right? It's so much about, what you have, right? Which is wrong, right? It's where you live. It's where you vacation. It's what kind of car do you drive? How much money do you have in the bank, right? So to your point, you're always going to be moving that goalpost if that's what you're focused on. But if you really think about it and you get cynical, right? And I guess you kind of figure this out as you age, right?
Right.
I always say, in your 20s, you're having fun. In your 30s, you're in your acquisition stage. In your 40s, you kind of go, holy shit, right? You go, wow, I'm starting to be revealed. I get it, right? Like they had us on this treadmill, right? They being like just the whole system, right? Consume, consume, consume. And as you're consuming on the pursuit of happiness, you're consuming on the pursuit of success, right? And then you realize that, wait a second, none of this is what's really important, right? And so that's what's been revealed for me. And so one of the hardest things for me was understanding fulfillment. So like, what does fulfillment mean for you?
A lot of what I look at in terms of life is related to family. So fulfillment to me is being able to enjoy a quality of life with the people that I care about the most. Everything else, like what I work for, what I do from 9 to 5, that's so that I can enjoy some quality, lifetime, love, whatever you want to call it, with the people that I care about.
So again, is that something that you've always felt like, or is it kind of evolved?
It's evolved
over the the last number of decades.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's evolved over the last number because we go through different stages in life. Right?
Yeah.
In your 20s, you're not thinking about family. All right, from that perspective, in your 30s, it is a bit of a hustle and a bit of a grind, right? But I think once you hit your 40s, you start to think about mortality.
Yeah.
And the things that may have been important to you in your 20s and 30s are less important then. And the people that you care about, those sort of intangible moments when you go on vacations with your kids, or, you're watching a movie together, or when they're young and you're walking them to school and holding hands, right? Like all of those things are the things that I think keep me fulfilled.
It's so interesting you said that because just this week, I think Cole's going off to university, right? He's going to go away, and oddly, he's been spending more and more time in around us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Justine this week pulled an old laptop of mine that I had under my desk and charged it and started showing these clips of like all three of them when they were a lot younger, right? And you almost like, for me, almost forgot about those things, right? But when you go back and you revisit them and you look at it and you go, man, we've lived a lot of life.
Yeah.
Right. And we should be so proud of the opportunity to live our life, and that's how I'm drawing fulfillment today. Like, I kind of look back to like when Andrew wrote, Warren directed, I produced, and you had a principal role in Szechuan and a Balcony, right? For me, I wanted to be in film back then because I wanted to tell Black stories. I thought that was really important. We were a time when we were young where there was some good Black television, but Black films where we're, pigeonholing us into the gangsters, living in poverty in the United States of America. And I'll never forget, I don't know if you'll remember this, but I'll never forget, you bought me a ticket to see Spike Lee speak, Convocation Hall, UFT, and you and I went together, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I framed that poster because we got him to sign it, right? He signed it. We framed it, and I still have that poster to this day.
Wow.
I often wonder, what keeps some people going when others tap out, right? I had the opportunity to ask Andrew, right, Burroughs, when he was on the show, why he didn't quit when it got hard, right? So, like, why didn't you quit when life gets hard? Like, what is it about you that just keeps moving forward?
Again, I think it is, what are the options, right? I mean, life is hard, fine, but in life, there are going to be wins and losses, but life is finite. So what I'm doing now in the time that I have on this planet is just sort of like a speck, right? Like it 200 years from now, if this earth is still in existence, are people going to remember me? I don't know, but I want to be remembered. So whether it is the work that I do,
right,
through Speaker Spotlight and the impact that it has, whether it is, the work that I do on film and television, all of those things, or even this podcast, I think what keeps me going is the urge to leave a little bit of a legacy, to leave a memory of who I was and what I was able to accomplish.
Well said. Is there something that you want to accomplish? Like, do you have something in your mind either you want to accomplish before, your journey here on planet Earth is over?
No, I just want to live a good life. The accomplishments the things that I am focusing on really are personal wins, and as opposed to kind of, winning an award. It's more of, can I push myself out of my comfort zone and go beyond what I think I was able to achieve? Those are the accomplishments that I have. So, 10 years ago, it probably would have been, I'd love to be, have like a recurring role on a TV show.
Right.
Right. And so when I auditioned for Designated Survivor, it was for one episode.
Right.
Right. So I just was like, yeah, this is just an audition. And after I booked it and on set, they said to us, the 3 or 4 White House reporters, they said, well, anytime that there is a press conference in the White House briefing room, we're going to use the same reporters, right, to ask questions, because in real life, that's how it works.
Yeah.
And so lo and behold, 4 seasons later, I'm still coming back on that show.
Amazing.
So again, it was, at the time, the audition was, I just want to have a great audition, right? I want to, take these lines, turn it into something, and have them look at me and say, yeah, he's good at what he does, right? And then whatever happens, happens.
It sounds like you're very grounded in the present, right? And, you're right. And so I've read this quote before, and or there's this saying that, the unhappiest people live in the past, the happiest people live in the present, and overachievers live in the future, right? And what I'm hearing from you now, is man, you are so grounded in the present, right? That you really are not giving much thought to, what happened in the past, because that can't be changed, right? And speculating is what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
Right. Because doing that is to me now, I've come to realize it's a waste of time.
Yeah, so much of it is out of your
Right?
control.
It's just, we're just giving ourselves the negative energy,
Mhm.
and it just doesn't make any sense at all, man. Like it just blows my mind. So you live firmly in the center, in my mind, in the center being present, right? It's really interesting because when we think about living in the present, it's difficult to do in the world in which we live in, because we're always messaged that we need something else, or we need to do something else. How do you keep that going? Like, do you struggle with it at all? Like, because it can't be just perfect. It can't be just like every single day, like I'm good, I'm centered. Or is it?
You know what? Think it was a conversation that I had with someone that helped kind of center me. Believe me, I lived with years of regret, about decisions that I made, sort of right or wrong choices, all of those things. What if I did this? What if I did that? But I think it was really about this idea of, I think it's called radical acceptance, which is just that, there isn't a right or a wrong decision in life. There's just a decision. Right. And so we just have to accept that. And so for me, it's like, I don't worry about the future so much, about like, am I making the right choice here? And I think even with conversations with you, I've learned to just sort of lean into my fear, lean into my anxiety about what might happen, and just go for it.
Yeah, fear is a crazy thing. Reading this book, and it's John Bradshaw's book, and it's shame, right? It's about shame and toxic shame, right? And if we, so many of us have bought into, why we feel the way we feel about ourselves, right? And we let fear grab a hold of us, right? And it's really grounded in this toxic shame, right? That you believe something is not right with you because somebody told you something was not right about you, right? And it's liberating as I'm reading the book to realize that, hey, I'm not on this journey by myself, right? And there's a lot of other people that are going through this, and it manifests in so many different ways. You can be an overachiever, you can be an underachiever, right? You can be, a criminal, you can be, a priest, right? Like there's so many reasons why people do the things that they do, but so much of it kind of goes back to this thought process of toxic shame and how it can cripple you. And I know for many years, being afraid to do things has stopped me. Right?
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this at great length, right? About wanting to look at doing different things with your life, right? And then you get afraid. You literally get afraid, and you go, like for me, it was like, well, nobody wants to hear my story. You know what I mean? Like, like my story's not important. And then, going through that process and doing that work, and still it's a work in progress, you start to realize that, yeah, you do have a story, and everybody's story is equal. And that's how it kind of landed on legacy.
Yeah.
Right? Is that we don't have to be, and we love you, West Hall, you know what I mean? We love you, the Drakes of the world, right? But we are here doing our thing on this planet. And I think it needs to be, it needs to be documented. And I think we need to give ourselves the flowers. I think we barrel through life every single day. Some of us, I know I certainly was guilty of it, not feeling good enough, or I've got to accomplish more, right? I've got to be more. I've got to make more money. I've got to, all this stuff, right? More. So now I'm finding myself, like you, more in the center and trying to be present. Work in progress. Definitely a work in progress. So this is a part of the podcast where we start to wind down, right? And I asked the question, one of the, my last question is, at the end of your life journey, Dee, how do you really want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as loving, caring, compassionate friend, as an honest parent, one who isn't afraid to speak about his emotions. And I, particularly with my kids, I really want them to know how much I love them, which I tell them all the time. It's It doesn't seem like a big thing.
What? Telling your kids that you love them?
Telling your kids that you love
Well,
them.
I think it's huge.
Right. Me, yeah, exactly. But I think at the same time, growing up in the household that I grew up in, I knew that my dad cared about me. Right. But I'd probably would say it wasn't until last year that I got a hug from my dad, and I love him and he loves me. Right. But this idea of legacy, right? Like, when you look at people that are out walking the streets that have suffered through all kinds of intergenerational trauma, I want to make sure that I do my best to sort of leave my kids and the people that are around me in a good place. And that's the impact that I want to have, right? I want to be there for the people that I can be there for.
There's a reason why we're friends and we've been friends for so long, right? I totally understand where you're coming from that, right? And then I beat myself up about the things that I did wrong, right? So again, you're going back into the past and you got to try and remain present, right? And I think what's really interesting about what you just said is realizing that you're not perfect. You took the best things that you could from your parents, right? And then you dumped the things that you didn't want from them, right? And you evolved, right? And I think that that's so important, I always say, like, if we're not evolving, we might as well be on the other side of the grass, right? So as long as we're here, we should be in the pursuit of evolving, right? And becoming better human beings. And I certainly know, man, I'm trying, right? I'm trying. And even when I make a mistake with my own kids, I apologize, right? I truly do. And Jay's here doing the sound today, but he'll get these random text messages from me that says, "Hey man, I love you." You know what I mean? And I think it's just really important that if we don't do that, it's you're missing that part of that legacy. So I'll end with a quote, which I think resonates with who you are. And it's a very simple quote. It's by Napoleon Hill, and it says, "You become what you think about." And I think that's the energy that you're putting out. And by the way, this is not something that's new, that Dee's like, this middle-aged man now has this wisdom. He had this wisdom all this many years ago. You really, truly did, and I just want to say this out loud. I just remember, like, at one, I don't know, we were like in our 20s, early 20s, very early 20s, right? And you were dating someone and you were just like, oh, you know what? Like, if it doesn't work, or maybe it was your late 20s, I can't remember what it was, but at some point you'd said to me, this was not working. And then I just move on. Right. And I was like, wow, this is so profound. Right. Like, for me, because being the chicken, right?
Yeah.
Being a chicken, you kind of want, we were kind of doing this dumb stuff where it's like, okay, well, if she's mad at me, then she'll break up with me, and then I don't have to go through that pain of breaking up with somebody. And you kind of brought that to life, right? And I guess it's one of the things that I will always remember you for, is just that wisdom that you had as a young man. So I think it's done is amplified itself over the years, right? And the things that you think about are the things that you become. Right. So you're on this journey. You are going to leave this legacy. And this is the gift that you'll give back to both of your boys. Right. And they'll be able to hear, who you were as a child, as a young man, and how you grew and progressed over the years. So thank you for coming and sharing your story. Thank you for gracing me with your presence this morning. Nothing but love for you, man.
Nothing but love to you right back, man. We've been friends for many decades.
I know.
We'll continue to be that way.
Let's, knock on wood, man. We keep this relationship going and we live many, many more years. And, man, we'll be able to look back at this and reminisce about this conversation. And best of all, it's going to be here forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, D. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into The Who Project today. I hope our conversation has sparked a fire within you to reflect on your core values and the intentional choices that will define your journey. If you felt inspired by this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a boost of inspiration. Remember, your values are your guiding star. Let them lead you to a life brimming with purpose and fulfillment. Until next time, I'm PG, urging you to lead with what truly matters to you the most. And before I sign off, I want you to remember this. When you define who you are, you will discover the success you deserve.